Rain was falling softly that evening. The street was almost empty. Lights from the small shops reflected on the wet ground like broken stars. In one corner, near an old wall, a little girl sat with a small toy in her hands. It was a teddy bear, brown, torn, and missing one eye. She held it close to her chest, whispering to it as if it could hear her. "It's my favorite toy," she said quietly. Her voice trembled. People walked past her without stopping. Some looked, most didn't. She was just another poor child sitting by the roadside. But if anyone had looked closer, they would have seen something different. Not just hunger. It's not just sadness, but a story waiting to be told. The girl's name was Rita. She was around 8 years old. Her clothes were thin, her feet bare. The cold wind made her shiver, but she didn't move. She just sat there, holding the teddy tighter and tighter. For Rita, that toy was not just cloth and cotton. It was her last piece of happiness, her only friend left from the days. When life was still kind, she remembered how her mother had given it to her on her 6th birthday. "Rita," her mother had said, smiling, "you must always take care of it. This teddy will stay with you when I can't." At that time, Rita didn't understand what her mother meant. She just laughed and hugged the teddy, naming it Toto. But life changed quickly. Now, 2 years later, she sat hungry, tired, and alone. Her mother was sick at home, too weak to work. For 2 days, they had nothing to eat. Rita had searched for bottles and paper to sell, but no one wanted to buy. The rain grew heavier. Rita looked up at the sky and whispered, "Mama, what do I do now?" Her stomach growled. She pressed the teddy to her chest again. "Toto, you're hungry too, right?" she asked softly, almost smiling. "Don't worry. Mama will be fine. I'll find food for us." A man walked by and stopped near her. He looked at the teddy and said, "Little girl, you selling that toy?" Rita's eyes widened. "No." "It's my favorite toy," she said quickly. The man shrugged. "All right. Just asking. But if you want, I'll give you 50 rupees for it." Rita froze. 50 rupees. That could buy bread. Maybe milk for Mama. Her eyes fell on the teddy again. The same toy her mother had repaired many times. Sewing its torn arm with old thread, she whispered, "Mama said never sell memories," and then looked away. The man was already walking away, his umbrella moving slowly through the rain. Rita wanted to call him back, but her lips wouldn't move. Tears rolled down her cheeks. A few minutes later, she stood up and began walking through the rain, holding the teddy tight. The market wasn't far, but her steps were slow. The sound of thunder filled the air, mixing with the noise of vehicles and people shouting prices in the crowd.
Ow.
Rita looked so small, almost invisible, but inside her, a big storm was growing, the fight between love and hunger. She stopped near a toy shop. The bright light made her blink. Inside, new shiny toys smiled from the shelves, cars, dolls, teddy bears with ribbons. Her teddy looked like a shadow of the past compared to them. Still, she whispered again, "It's my favorite toy." The shopkeeper noticed her. "Hey, what do you want?" he asked. Rita didn't answer. She looked at the teddy one more time and said softly, "I just want Mama to eat." Her words were lost in the sound of rain. The shopkeeper laughed lightly, not understanding her pain. But in her small heart, something broke that night. The first crack in her childhood. As she turned to leave, the camera would slowly zoom in on the teddy's face, one eye staring, one missing like it knew what was about to happen. And the narrator's voice would say, "No one knew how deep hunger could cut. No one knew that tonight a little girl would lose her only friend, not because she wanted to, but because hunger doesn't ask for choices." Morning came with a weak sun hiding behind gray clouds. The rain had stopped, but the ground was still wet and cold. Rita woke up on the small floor mat beside her mother. The room smelled of medicine and damp clothes. Her mother coughed softly. "Rita, did you sleep?" Rita nodded. "Yes, Mama, I'm fine." She wasn't. Her stomach hurt from hunger. Her lips were dry. The room they lived in was small, just one bed, one chair, and a cracked window. In one corner stood an empty stove. They hadn't cooked anything for 2 days. There was only a glass of water and half a piece of stale bread on the floor. Her mother tried to sit up, but her hands trembled. "Maybe I can go to work today," she said weakly. Rita quickly shook her head. "No, Mama, you rest. I'll find food. I promise." Her mother smiled faintly. "You're just a little girl, Rita." Rita stood tall, trying to be brave. "Then I'll be a big girl today." She picked up an old bag and stepped outside. The cold air hit her face, but she didn't care. She walked through the narrow streets, her eyes scanning for anything she could collect. Bottles, paper, metal, anything. She stopped near a shop where the owner was cleaning the street. "Uncle, can I take the bottles?" He waved his hand. "Take them if you want, but they're all broken." Rita picked them anyway, putting the sharp pieces carefully into her bag. Her small fingers were shaking, but she kept working. By afternoon, the sun was high, and Rita was tired. She went to the junk buyer's shop, a small wooden shed that smelled of smoke and old metal. The man looked at her bag and laughed. "This is all? Only broken glass? Worth maybe 10 rupees. Rita bit her lip. "Can I get some food instead?" The man frowned. "Food? This is not a hotel. Take your money and go." She took the small coin and left quietly. Her eyes were burning, but she didn't cry. She walked past a bakery where the smell of bread filled the air. She stood outside watching a boy eat a bun, her hands pressed against her stomach. A kind lady noticed her and asked, "You hungry, child?" Rita nodded. The lady looked inside her purse, but it was empty. "I'm sorry, Beta. Maybe next time," Rita smiled weakly. "It's okay, Auntie." She turned away, her steps slow and heavy. When she reached home, her mother was still lying on the bed, her face pale. "Did you eat, Rita?" Rita smiled, hiding the truth. "Yes, Mama. I found food." Her mother smiled. "Good, you're a strong girl." Rita sat quietly beside her and looked at the teddy bear resting in her lap. Its fur was still wet from last night's rain. She hugged it tightly and whispered, "Toto, I lied to Mama again. But what should I do? She's getting weaker every day." The wind blew through the window, making the curtains dance. Rita closed her eyes and remembered happier times, her mother laughing, singing while cooking rice, fixing the toy's arm when it tore. Those memories felt like a dream now. Hunger was eating away at everything, their energy, their hope, their love. Evening came and her mother was still coughing. "Rita," she whispered, "tomorrow, go to the market. Maybe someone will help." Rita nodded, though she knew the market was full of noise and strangers who didn't care. That night she couldn't sleep. She watched her mother's chest rise and fall slowly. In the dark, the teddy's button eye shone faintly, like it was watching her too. She whispered, "Toto, we need money." "But how? What do we have left?" Her eyes wandered around the room, empty shelves, broken plates, torn clothes. And then her gaze stopped on the teddy bear. Her heart skipped a beat. "No," she whispered, "not you." But deep inside, a small voice answered, "Maybe it's the only way." She turned to her mother, who was sleeping weakly, and whispered again, "It's my favorite toy. But if it can bring food for Mama, maybe I have to do it." Her eyes filled with tears, and she held the teddy closer than ever before, as if she could stop tomorrow from coming. Outside, the night grew colder. The city lights flickered, and the narrator's voice would fade in softly. Morning light touched the cracks in the wall, painting thin golden lines across the small room. Rita opened her eyes slowly. Her mother was still asleep, her breathing faint and weak. The old clock ticked in silence. Rita sat up and looked around. The floor was cold, the air heavy. The small coins from yesterday were still lying beside her teddy bear. She picked them up and counted again. 10 rupees. Not enough for food, not enough for medicine, not enough for hope. Her mother's cough broke the silence. Rita rushed to her side. "Mama, are you okay?" Her mother smiled weakly. "Just tired, my child." "Did you eat yesterday?" Rita forced a smile. "Yes, Mama, I did." But her eyes said something else, something her mother was too tired to see. Rita looked at the teddy bear resting near the pillow. Its one button. I stared back, almost as if it knew the secret inside her heart. She picked it up gently, brushing the dust off its fur. "Toto," she whispered, "you remember Mama gave you to me on my birthday?" She said, "You'll stay with me forever." The toy said nothing, but her heart answered. Forever feels short when you're hungry. She sat quietly for a long time, staring at the toy, her mind filled with confusion. Hunger made her dizzy. Her stomach growled again, louder this time. She closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "I can't do it. I can't sell you." But her mother's soft voice echoed in her mind. "Rita, promise me you'll be strong when life gets hard." She looked at the teddy again, this time with trembling hands. "If I sell you, Mama can eat. She can get medicine. Maybe she'll smile again." Tears formed in her eyes. She wiped them quickly, as if afraid her toy might see her cry. Outside, she could hear the sound of the marketplace, voices calling, people selling things, life moving on without mercy. Somewhere deep inside her, a small flame of courage began to flicker. Rita took a deep breath and stood up. She looked at her mother, still asleep, and whispered softly, "I'll bring food, Mama. I promise." She found an old piece of cloth and wrapped the teddy carefully, like a treasure. Every knot she tied felt like a cut to her heart. "Toto," she said, "don't be angry. I'll bring you back one day." As she stepped outside, the cold wind hit her face again. The sky was cloudy, the ground wet from the night's rain. She held the wrapped toy close to her chest, as if protecting it from the world. The streets were full of people, men shouting prices, children laughing, cars honking. Rita walked slowly through the crowd. Each step felt heavier than the last. She passed a group of children playing with new toys. They were laughing, their hands full of color and joy. Rita smiled for a second, then her eyes lowered. "They have many toys," she thought. "I have one, and I'm losing it." She reached the market corner where the old man sold secondhand goods. The same man who had asked her last night, "You selling that toy?" Today, Rita walked toward him. Her heart pounded fast. The man looked up from his newspaper. "You again?" he said. "What do you have today?" Rita's hands shook as she opened the cloth. The teddy's face appeared, small and worn. The man raised his eyebrow. "This old thing? Not worth much." Rita looked down. Her voice was small, but steady. "It's my favorite toy, but I need money for food." For a second, even the man's face softened. "You sure, girl? You'll never get it back." Rita nodded slowly. "I'm sure." The man sighed, took a few coins from his pocket, and placed them on the table. Rita stared at them, shiny, real, enough for food. Her hand hesitated. The teddy stared back at her, silent, broken, loyal. She picked up the coins with shaking fingers. The moment her hand left the teddy, something inside her broke. A small gasp escaped her lips. It felt like giving away a piece of her soul. She turned quickly and walked away before the tears could fall. The sound of the market faded behind her. The narrator's voice would come in softly. "Sometimes the hardest decisions are made by the smallest hearts." Rita didn't sell her toy, she sold her childhood. The sun was high, and the air felt heavy with dust and noise. Rita walked through the busy market, clutching a few coins in her tiny hand. Her clothes were wet from the morning drizzle, and her hair stuck to her face, but she didn't care. The coins were warm from her palm, warm with sacrifice. People pushed past her, hurrying with their shopping bags. Vendors shouted from every corner, fresh bread, cheap fruits, toys for children. Every voice felt loud and cruel. The world seemed too big for a small girl like her. Rita stopped near a food stall. The smell of fried bread made her dizzy. Her eyes sparkled with hunger. She looked at the coins again. They weren't enough for much, but maybe enough for a small piece. "Uncle, can I get one bread?" she asked softly. The man behind the stall looked at her and frowned. "5 rupees, he said. Rita nodded quickly and placed the coins on the counter. He handed her a small piece of bread, hot and oily. She held it with both hands, as if it were gold. She took a small bite, soft, warm, perfect. Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness, but from the simple taste of food after 2 long days. She saved the rest, wrapping it in paper. "Mama will eat this," she whispered as she turned to walk back. She passed the same toy shop, the one with the bright window full of shiny dolls and colorful balls. Her steps slowed. Inside, on a dusty corner shelf, she saw her teddy bear. It was sitting upright, its one-eyed face staring blankly at the door. A small paper tag now hung from its ear. "Old toy, 50 rupees." Rita froze. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Her heart pounded so fast she thought people might hear it. She stepped closer to the window, her face pressing against the glass. "Toto," she whispered. The shopkeeper noticed her and frowned. "You again? What do you want now?" Rita blinked quickly and said, "Nothing. I was just looking." The man shrugged. "It's just an old toy, not worth anything." But to her, it was everything. She stood there for a long time, watching as other children came and went. One boy pointed at her teddy and laughed. "Who would want that broken thing?" He said. His mother pulled him away. Rita's eyes filled with tears again, but she stayed still. The shopkeeper called out to her, "Little girl, if you want it back, bring 50 rupees. Rita looked down. "I don't have that much," she said softly. "Then go," the man said. "Don't block my customers." Rita nodded and walked away. Each step felt heavier than before. The market sounds faded. All she could hear was the echo of her mother's voice and the memory of laughter around that old toy. She stopped near a quiet corner and sat on the ground. She took out the bread and looked at it. The smell was still fresh, but her appetite was gone. She broke it in half, staring at it for a long time. Her lips trembled. "Toto would have liked this smell," she whispered, half smiling, half crying. She looked up at the sky. Clouds were gathering again, dark and thick. The wind was starting to blow, carrying dust and paper across the street. Rita held the bread tightly and whispered, "I'll come back for you, Toto, I promise." Then she stood up and started walking home. Her tiny shadow stretched across the wet road, thin, tired, and lonely. As she reached the end of the street, thunder rolled. She turned once more, her eyes finding the toy shop in the distance. Through the glass, she could still see the teddy's face staring back. The narrator's voice faded in softly. "The market sells everything. Toys, food, even memories. But what it cannot sell is peace." As the first drops of rain began to fall again, Rita whispered to herself, "I'll get you back, Toto, even if I have to walk the whole world." She tucked the bread carefully inside her bag and ran through the rain, small feet splashing in puddles, eyes full of determination and tears. At that moment, the world seemed cruel, but Rita's heart was still brave. She didn't know what waited for her at home. She only knew she was carrying both hope and heartbreak in the same tiny hands. The screen would fade to black, and the sound of rain would grow louder. Sometimes the hardest part of losing something is seeing it again. The rain had followed Rita home. The small path to her house was muddy, and her feet were covered in wet dust. But she didn't care. In her little bag, she carried the warm piece of bread, a treasure she had fought the world for. Her hands trembled as she unlocked the weak wooden door. "Mama," she called softly, "I got food." "Real food." No answer. She stepped inside. The room was dark, except for a thin beam of light coming from the window. The air was heavy, thick with silence. Her mother lay still on the bed, her face pale, her hands resting on her chest. Rita's heart stopped for a moment. "Mama," she whispered again. "I'm home. Look, I got your favorite bread." Still nothing. The bread slipped from her hand and fell to the floor. The sound was small, but inside her heart it felt like thunder. She ran to the bed, shaking her mother's shoulder gently. "Mama, wake up. Please, I got food." "You said we'd eat together." Her mother's eyes didn't open. The world went quiet. The rain outside slowed, as if even the sky had stopped to listen. Rita's small hands pressed against her mother's face. Cold. Too cold? "No," she whispered. "No, Mama. Not now." Her voice cracked, breaking into small, painful sobs. She shook her again. harder this time. Wake up, please. I'll buy medicine. I'll bring more food. Just open your eyes. Tears ran down her face and dropped onto her mother's hands. The tiny room felt smaller than ever before. Rita fell to her knees beside the bed, hugging her mother's arm tightly. You promised, Mama. You said you'd get better. Her voice faded into a whisper. You can't leave me alone. Who will fix Toto now? The word Toto echoed in the air like a broken bell. For a long time she sat there in silence. Only her small sobs and the sound of dripping rain filled the room. Hours passed. The bread on the floor had gone cold, soaked from her tears. When night came, Rita lit a small candle near her mother's bed. The flame flickered weakly, just like her hope. Shadows danced on the walls, and Rita watched them, her eyes swollen from crying. She whispered softly, I sold Toto, Mama. I did it for you. But now, I have nothing. She looked at her mother's face again, peaceful, like she was only sleeping. Rita wanted to believe that, even for a moment. Outside, the storm had returned. The wind blew through the broken window, making the candlelight shiver. Rita held the candle close, afraid of the darkness. Her stomach growled again, but she didn't touch the bread. It didn't matter anymore. Food couldn't fill the emptiness inside her now. The neighbors came later that night when they noticed the door open. An old woman gasped when she saw Rita sitting beside her mother's still body. Oh, child, she whispered, her eyes full of tears. You shouldn't be alone like this. Rita didn't move. She just looked up and said Mama was hungry. But now she's not hungry anymore. The old woman covered her mouth and cried. She gently pulled Rita into her arms. Rita didn't resist. She just stared blankly at the candlelight as they prepared to take her mother away. Rita's voice broke the silence one last time. Can I keep her hand for a little longer? She asked softly. The woman nodded. Yes, child. Rita held her mother's hand tight as she once held her teddy. The warmth was gone, but the love remained. When they took her mother away, Rita sat alone in the small, empty room. The candle had burned halfway down. Shadows of the flames danced on the wall, painting the space with pain and memory. She whispered to herself, Toto, Mama's gone. The camera would slowly zoom out, the small girl sitting in the dim light, a piece of cold bread beside her. The sound of rain echoing softly. The narrator's voice would fade in like a whisper. Hunger took her mother. Life took her childhood, and all that remained was a little girl sitting between love and loss. As the screen darkens, Rita's final whisper can be heard, soft, trembling, but strong. I'll find you again, Toto. I promise. 3 days passed after the funeral. The rain had stopped, but the sky still looked gray and tired. Like Rita, the neighbors had helped bury her mother in a small graveyard at the edge of the city. Now the tiny room felt emptier than ever. Rita sat by the window floor, hugging her knees. The candle had melted completely. The bread was gone. Her eyes were swollen, her voice silent. The world had moved on, but time inside that room had stopped. She looked at the bed where her mother used to sleep. The blanket was still folded the same way. A piece of thread lay beside the pillow, the same thread her mother used to stitch Toto's arm. Rita picked it up and smiled sadly. Mama said memories never die, she whispered. Then why does it hurt so much to remember? Her stomach growled again, but she didn't move. Hunger was an old friend now. Pain didn't surprise her anymore. Only the silence did. A soft knock suddenly broke that silence. Knock, knock. Rita didn't answer at first. No one ever came to visit. Then the door creaked open slowly. The same shopkeeper from the market stood there, his umbrella dripping rainwater. He looked awkward, uncomfortable. In his hands was a small bundle wrapped in old cloth. Child, he said quietly, I heard about your mother. I'm sorry. Rita didn't say a word. She just watched him with empty eyes. He took a slow step inside. I don't usually do this, he continued. But something didn't feel right. He unwrapped the bundle. Inside was Toto, the same teddy, dirty, torn and missing one eye, but still hers. Rita gasped. Her hands covered her mouth. Her eyes filled with fresh tears. I kept it at the shop, the man said softly. I thought someone might buy it, but every time I looked at it, I heard your voice in my head. It's my favorite toy. Couldn't sleep at night. So, here. He placed the teddy on the bed and turned to leave. Keep it, little one. Some things aren't meant to be sold. Rita stood frozen for a moment. Then she ran forward and hugged the toy tightly. Her tears soaked its fur. It's you, Toto, she whispered. You came back. The shopkeeper nodded and closed the door quietly behind him. His footsteps faded down the alley. Rita sat down on the floor, hugging Toto close to her chest. The toy smelled of dust and old memories, but to her, it was home. For a long time, she just sat there, rocking back and forth, talking to the teddy as if it were her mother. You see, Mama? Toto came back to me. You were right. Love always finds its way. A soft ray of sunlight broke through the clouds and fell across the room, touching her face. The light was warm for the first time in weeks. Rita smiled through her tears. She looked at the thread in her hand, and then at Toto's torn arm. Carefully, she began to sew the toy just like her mother used to. Her small fingers were shaking, but steady enough to stitch hope back into the toy. Outside, children were laughing and playing in the mud. A woman from next door called out, Rita, come have some soup, dear. Rita looked up and smiled faintly. Thank you, Auntie. I'll come soon. She looked at Toto and whispered, Mama would like that, right? The toy's one eye seemed to shine in the sunlight. Rita placed the teddy on the pillow and folded her hands. She closed her eyes and spoke in a small, honest voice. Thank you, God. You took Mama, but you sent Toto back. Maybe you knew I still needed someone to talk to. The room felt different now. Still poor, still quiet, but not empty. It had light again. Days later, people saw Rita helping the neighbor woman at her stall. She would wash dishes, arrange vegetables, and smile when someone called her name. At night, she would sit by the window and talk to Toto, telling him stories about the stars, the market, and her mother's songs. One evening, a young man from a charity group came to the neighborhood. He saw Rita working quietly and asked her story. The neighbor told him everything, the toy, the hunger, the loss. The next day, he returned with a small bag of food and books. He said, You should go to school, Rita. Your mother would be proud. Rita looked at Toto and smiled. Yes, Mama would like that. She pressed the teddy to her heart once more before walking outside with the bag of books. The sun was bright, the air fresh after many gray days. The camera would follow her small figure walking toward the light. The narrator's voice would fade in softly. She sold her toy to feed her mother. Life took everything away, then gave back a piece of love. Because sometimes, hope returns in the same form you lost it. As the screen turns gold with sunlight, Rita's voice whispers gently in the background. It's still my favorite toy. And now, it's my favorite memory.